Hello there. Hi, everybody, and welcome. Hello, Twitch, YouTube, Discord, and TikTok. How are y'all doing? Is everybody all right? So, I have been away for a while, for a long time. I decided to, after Cape Town, I said I would be back on Wednesday. I was way too tired after I got back from Cape Town, and I decided to not stream. Yes, I did feel guilty about it. Yes, Justin scolded me. Thank you, Justin. And so, yeah, I took a bit of a break, but now I am back from outer space. Just walked in to find you here with that same look upon your face. Yes, my jokes are bad. It's a good thing my cooking is great. So, let's get into it. We are reading. Oh, wait. Yes, I got it right. The Architecture of Modern Empire by Arundhati Roy. It is interviews with with Arundhati Roy. So we are in chapter 4, page 86, if you are following along with the book. Hey. And so, yeah, we've been discussing, well, the chapter is called Globalization of Dissent. And she's been discussing America and Iraq. And so we get into it in a point where it is pretty much the same narrative with Iraq as the narrative was with Afghanistan and Iran back in the 2000s. So she had already said, the US was going to attack Iraq. And of course they did. And so we get into it towards the end of page 86. The question is, talk about how war is viewed as a product to be marketed and sold to consumers, in this case, the American public. And that's such an important element to discuss, because what is the US's biggest export? Not in terms of volume, but in terms of money that is generated. It's war. America profits more of war than any other country in the world, and majority of its income comes from war, from weapons manufacturing. And if the arms are not being bought, if America does not sell these armaments, it doesn't have an economy. So let's go from there. She answers. Yeah, entertainment. Referring to the timing of the Iraq War, a Bush administration spokesperson said, "From a marketing point of view, you don't introduce new products in August." They were asking themselves, what's the best season to introduce this new product? When should you start the ad campaign? It's disgusting to me that the lives of the people of the global south are seen as cannon fodder for America's business of war, because they are looking at war as a product to be sold. When should you launch it? Today, the crossover between Hollywood and the US military is getting more and more promiscuous. War is also an economic necessity now. A significant section of the US economy depends on the sale of weapons. There has to be a turnover. You can't have cruise missiles lying around on the factory floor. The economies of Europe and the United States depend on the sale and manufacture of weapons. This is a huge imperative to go to war. Apart from this, the US needs millions of barrels of oil a day to keep its bloated economy chugging along. It needs Iraq. It needs Venezuela. And this was the last question that we approached 2 weeks ago. Yes. And we started talking about Venezuela. the impunity with which the US and Israel act towards the global south, specifically oil rich countries, is astonishing to me. And that is because all of the checks and balances to prevent a president and his wife from being kidnapped and taken across a border have been removed by the US itself. Why is it that two countries can vote against something at the UN and that vote not pass? Only two countries. What accounts for the brazenness of the Bush administration? And I think in this question, David is asking not just about the Bush administration, but about all administrations that justify war in this manner. Paul Wolfowitz, the Deputy Secretary of Defense, was talking about Syria, saying it was behaving badly, like a headmaster wagging his finger at a bad student. How is this attitude seen outside the US? I think in two ways, she says. On one hand, it's seen as a kind of uncouth stupidity. On the other, it's seen as just the insulting language of power. You speak like that because you can. I mean, what has the US gotten away with recently? Pretty much everything. Israel, it's the same. They are allowed to use this language because they've always gotten away with it. In an interview you did in Socialist Worker, you said, "The greatest threat to the world today is not Saddam Hussein, it's George Bush, joined at the hip with his new Foreign Secretary, Tony Blair." If people don't remember that Tony Blair has as much blood on his hands as Bush, please do yourself a favor and do the research, do your due diligence, because he definitely has as much blood on his hands, Iraqi blood on his hands, as George Bush does. Talk about Tony Blair. Why has he attached himself to American power with such fervor and vigor? And there's an important point in going back to all of this right now, because the Trump administration is acting in very much the same way. And guess what? Keir Starmer, who is the first Labour MP since, I think it was what was it, David Cameron, is kowtowing the same line. That's a much more intriguing question than why the Bush administration is so brazen. The combination of stupidity, brutality, and power is an answer to the first. But why is Blair behaving the way he is? I've been thinking about it, and my understanding is that what happened is that the American Empire has metamorphosized from the British Empire. The British Empire morphed into the American Empire, and Tony Blair wants to be part of it because that's where he thinks he belongs. That's where his past, his country's past, has been. It's a way of staying in the imperial game, and that is incredibly important to understand. That it is an imperial game. It is not a game of checkers or chess. It's a game of cat and mouse. I was reading an article in the New York Times the other day that was appropriately called something like "The Feeding Frenzy in Iraq." It said that countries representing their corporate interests are bidding for subcontracts from Bechtel and Halliburton. Among the countries that are petitioning Bechtel and Halliburton, Bush administration officials said that Britain has the best case because it has shed blood in Iraq. I wondered what they meant, because the little British blood that was shed was basically shed by Americans. And since they hadn't specified whose blood was shed, I presume they mean the British shed Iraqi blood in Iraq. So their status as co-murderers mean that they ought to be given privileged access to these subcontracts. The article went on to say that Lady Simmons, who is deputy leader of the House of Lords, was travelling in the United States with 4 British captains of industry. They were making the case that they should be given preference, not only because they were co-murderers, but because Britain has had a long and continuous relationship with Iraq since imperial days, right up to the time of sanctions, which means that they were trading with Iraq, doing business with Iraq, through Saddam Hussein's worst periods. And of course, any brown leader who no longer follows the party line is neutralized. Think Idi Amin. The idea that you're actually trying to petition for privilege because you were once the imperial master of Iraq is unthinkable for those of us who come from former colonies. It's terrifying. It's unthinkable for those of us who come from the former colonies, because we think of imperialism as rape. So the way the logic seems to work is, first you rape, then you kill. Then you petition to rape the corpse. It's necrophilia. On what grounds are these arguments even being made? And made without irony. When people talk about rape, and they say, this is a little bit of a caveat. When people talk about rape and they say you cannot compare a test to being, bent over a barrel, all of those kinds of things. We say language matters. When it comes to colonialism, I say it's an absolute apt comparison. Because the crimes that that empire has committed against the colonized, it's as unforgivable. It's as brutal. What factor does racism play in the construction of imperial power? Now there he's getting into the crux of it. Because colonialism, white supremacy, capitalism, patriarchy are all facets of imperial power. It is all facets. They are all facets of empire. They are characteristics of empire. Racism plays the part today as it did in colonial times. There isn't any difference. I mean, the only people who are going to argue for the good side to imperialism are white. People who were once masters or Uncle Toms. I don't think you're going to find that argument being made by people in India or the people in South Africa, people in former colonies. The only ones who want colonialism back in its new avatar of neoliberalism are the former white masters and their old cohorts, the native elites. Their point men then and now. The whole rhetoric of we need to bring democracy to Iraq is absurd when you think of the fact that the US supported Saddam Hussein and made sure that he ruled with an iron fist for all those years. Then they used sanctions to break the backs of civil society. Then they made Iraq disarm. Then they attacked Iraq. And now they are taking all of its assets. And that's how it works. It is what is happening in Iran right now. Install a government. Support it. Sanction it. Steal it. Make sure it cannot defend itself. The people who supported the military attack on Iraq may concede today, Well, those reasons that we gave perhaps are not valid. We can't find the plutonium and uranium and biological and chemical weapons. Let's say we concede these points. But after all, Miss Roy, we've got rid of the terrible dictator. Aren't the Iraqi people better off now? Since when are people better off when they have to rebuild their lives from scratch? It's like saying, oh, a hurricane flattened your homes. You rebuild. Hey, you get a second chance. But it's worse. It's being done by people. She says, if that's were the case, then why are they busy supporting dictators now all over Central Asia? Why are they supporting the Saudi regime? We are told that Saddam Hussein is a monster who must be stopped, and only the US can stop him. It's an effective technique, this use of the urgent morality of present to obscure the diabolical sins of the past and the malevolent plans for the future. This present urgency can always be used to justify past sins and future. It's a non-argument. Islam is being targeted and demonized in much of the media and also among what I can only describe as mullahs and ayatollahs here in the United States. People like Franklin Graham, son of Billy Graham, who called Islam an evil and wicked religion. Jerry Falwell, who said Muhammad was a terrorist. Jerry Vines, who is a prominent preacher, described Muhammad as a demon-obsessed pedophile. That is the narrative we see all the time. She answers, this seems to integrate with a lot of the rhetoric coming from the Hindu nationalists in India about Islam. Vajpayee said recently, wherever Muslims are, they do not want to live peacefully. I see the absolute opposite everywhere I go in the world. No, it started with the Orientalists. The current way in which Islam is portrayed, absolutely, these are things that people kind of latch onto. But it started with Orientalism. It started with scholars going into what they called the Orient and demonizing Islam right from the start, because it was the only faith in the world that had any pull to steer people away from Christianity. She continues, the mullahs of the Islamic world are the mullahs of the Hindu world, and the mullahs of the Christian world are all the same, and we are against them all. I can tell you, insult for insult, you will find mullahs in Pakistan or Afghanistan or Iran saying the same things about Christianity. And you will find mullahs in India and the RSS people in the Hindu right wing who say the same thing about each other. I see Praveen Togadia of the VHP and Paul Wolfowitz and John Ashcroft and Osama bin Laden and George Bush as being on the same side. These artificial differences are a waste of time. We are trying to figure out who is insulting who. They're all on the same side. And we, she's saying the people, are against them all. And I think that answer is a little bit of a cop-out, honestly, because the very real hatred of Islam, and I refuse to call it Islamophobia, absolutely refuse to call it Islamophobia, because it's not a phobia. It's not inexplicable. That is the key about a phobia. The hatred of Muslim people is not inexplicable. It has direct roots in colonial power. And in a world where you can't take people's faith away from them, I would never. I feel like understanding faith is, I want to understand people's faith better. Yeah, I mean, you don't want to control people, right? You want people to have free will. And that's part of the reason I love the end of Good Omen Season 3. If you haven't watched Good Omen Season 3, I am so sorry. I'm giving you spoilers. Please hand up in the chat if you haven't watched it yet and you intend to watch it. So I won't actually give you spoilers. I think that's why some of you who have heard me over the past few days have noticed me singing. So nobody gonna watch it? I mean, okay. Creating a world without God, Satan, heaven or hell. You can't. You can't take God away from people. What you can do is instill tolerance, is instill interfaith joy. I attend church almost every Sunday. I'm never going to believe. You can't force someone to believe, just like you cannot force somebody to unbelieve. You cannot take people's faith away from them. What you can do is dismantle the church. The church as we know it. Anyway, I see her answer as a little bit of a cop-out. Because, yes, all of these people are pointing fingers at each other regardless of religion. But Muslim hatred has come to such a head in society that it really, really needs to be addressed. And we need to look at the reasons why Muslim hatred is so ingrained in white supremacist society. You've traveled to the US on several occasions. You give talks and meet with a lot of people. Why do you think Americans have been so susceptible to the Bush propaganda, specifically about Iraq being such an imminent threat to the national security of the United States? Replace it with Iran. Same. And that Iraq was responsible for September 11th, and that Iraq is connected to Al-Qaeda, and there is simply no empirical evidence to support any of those assumptions. She says, I think on one level, the fact that the American media is just like a corporate boardroom bulletin, but on a deeper level, why are Americans such frightened people? Why are Americans such frightened people? This is a threat. That is a threat. Why is there so much fear in American society? You know, a good couple of years ago, I heard of a band called Frightened Rabbit. Rest in peace. That lead singer, beautiful, beautiful man. I saw him live here, and unfortunately he committed suicide not too long after He played live in South Africa. I saw the name Frightened Rabbit and I laughed and said, "Oh, like America." After all, many of us routinely live with terrorism. If Iraq or El Salvador or Cuba is going to destroy America, then what is the point of all these weapons? These $400 billion spent every year on weapons. If you are that vulnerable in the end, it doesn't add up. Oof. It's 400 billion a year, not including the Iraq war, which is supplemental expenditure. So she says, so that's what makes a country with all these bombs and missiles and weapons the most frightened country and the most frightened people on earth. Why is that country, why are the people in that country, like India, which has nothing in comparison, so much less scared? Why do we live easier lives, more relaxed lives? People are so isolated and alone and suspicious and competitive with each other and so sure that they are about to be conned by their neighbor or their mother or their sister or their grandmother. What is the use of having 50% of the world's wealth or whatever it is you have if you're going to live this pathetic, terrified life? I'm going to say this very gently to Americans listening. My American friends, I love you with all my heart. I would beg you to come and spend a month in South Africa. Life is harder here, yes. Life is harder for a lot of people. But take the resources that you have as an American day to day and see how far it stretches here. How much less things cost. How, yeah, we complain that the country is doing this, the government is doing that. We don't get this from the government, we don't get that from the government. But ultimately, when you go to a public hospital, you are going to get treated, albeit 6 hours later. But you are going to get treated. And you're not going to have to choose between that treatment and eating. If you are privileged enough to have private insurance, you will go to the ER. You won't pay anything up front. If you do get a bill for anything outside of what your medical insurance covers, yeah, you do have the wait time. I've sat on VC with people who have been waiting in the ER for one call lasted 13 hours because they waited 13 hours to be seen. In the US. Yeah, you'll have, if you're fortunate enough to be on private insurance, you may get a bill at the end of it, like these extra things that medical insurance didn't cover. They'll give you a payment plan. This is how much you can pay monthly so that you don't starve. We are in one of the most unsafe countries in the world. I can't go for a walk right now. It's dark out. It's 11 o'clock at night. There's no way I'm going to go for a walk. Especially as a femme. We have the highest femicide rate in the world. I have more of a chance of getting gunned down by police in the US than I do of being mugged right now outside my house. And that to me is a culture of fear. Why are the police afraid of fucking acorns? Why do they open fire at the slightest twitch of a lip? And snowballs, yes. Why do they empty entire clips into someone? I don't know. Just for existing. Actually, I need to look this up. It's a horror story, and it's very left field. But trust me on this, it's a short story. It is a horror book. It is an anthology of horror stories by Black writers in the US. N.K. Jemisin. So N.K. Jemisin, a wonderful fantasy writer, wrote a story for Jordan Peele's collection called Out There Screaming. The story is called Reckless Eyeballing. Let me see if I can find it. It's so good. Where is the sample? Yeah, okay. So Reckless Eyeballing, I can't find the actual PDF, but I'll try later. Tells a story about a cop who starts pulling people over because he sees blinking eyes in their headlights. And it's really understated and it's so excellent. But like, it just shows like the inherent fear in cops. But Out There Screaming is a really good anthology. A lot of people don't think it's not. But yeah, anyway, I'm deviating. The US is so scared. People in the US are so scared of everything. It makes me wonder, like, yeah, women live in fear constantly. Women and femmes live in fear constantly. But I'm not going to pick up a gun and say, I'm going to target every man out there. It is a very plausible thing for an American to do. To say, I live in fear, therefore I need to kill these people. And I shall be right back. right, let's get back to it. Michael Moore's documentary Bowling for Columbine explores this fear to some degree. I love you too. She says, what is wonderful about Bowling for Columbine is that it's accessible to ordinary people. It broke through the skin of mainstream media. The language of the left must become more accessible and must reach more people. We must acknowledge that if we don't reach people, it's our failure. Every success of Fox News is a failure for us. Every success of major corporate propaganda is our failure. It's not enough to moan about it. We have to do something about it. Reach ordinary folk. Break the stranglehold of mainstream propaganda. It's not enough to be intellectually pristine and self-righteous. TikTok communists. There's a growing independent media movement in the US, and it's connected with movements and organizations such as Sarai.net in New Delhi, and independent media centers all over the world. There are a lot of young people getting involved in the media who are frustrated with the corporate pablum that they receive, and they're doing something about it. You're in touch with some of these activists in India? She says, the fact that hundreds of thousands of people in the US were out on the streets marching against the war was partly because of that independent media, and that is why independent media is so important. Unfortunately, it's not enough to walk out on the street on a weekend. One of the things that needs to be done is for the alternate media to reach a stage where the corporate media becomes irrelevant. That has to be the goal. Not that you attack it, but you make it irrelevant. And that you contextualize it. Yes. Absolutely fuck yes. How do you develop the ability to discern fact from fiction in approaching news from mainstream outlets? Oh, this is important. I think the only way to do it is to follow the money. Who owns which newspaper? Yes! It's what I've been saying for years and years and years. Follow the paper trail. Who owns the television network? What are their interests? Assume that corporate media has an agenda. And so the least you can do is cross-check a particular story with other sources of information that are independent. If you can afford it, please subscribe to Ground News. It is not a news source. It is an aggregator. It looks at which sources are on the left, which are on the right, which are center, who's funding them, who's benefiting from that news. And they ascertain whether it's left or right by using a ton of metrics. If you can afford it, subscribe to Ground News. If you can do that, you can see discrepancies. Compare, for example, the way that US media and British media cover the same war, the same event. How does it differ from how Al Jazeera covers it? It's not as if these other media don't have an agenda, but if you look at these two, at least your head is not being messed up completely. Yeah. Look at all sources. Every single one. So, a day in the life of a journalist. Well, me as a journalist. Oh, Sloan, if you want to subscribe, go to Monty Maida's page. Let me put her name in the chat. Why does it not give me the option to comment on my own live? There you go. Go to her page. She has a discount code for your first month of Ground News. And then, obviously, you pay full price. But her discount is quite significant. So, yeah, check her out. But also check out her content. Deconstructing from being a Christian nationalist, and now is like, hey, let's do Bible study. Let's see what it actually says. And LL, if you are here, please tell me you are still here. No, they left. Yeah, see her content. It's really, really good how she picks apart every single argument by Christian nationalists. In the US, there are a number of well-funded right-wing think tanks, and these think tanks provide many of the voices that are being heard and seen in the media. For example, one of the most prominent is the American Enterprise Institute. Some there, the holder of the Freedom Chair incidentally, Michael Layden, said this, reported in the National Review Online. Every 10 or so years, the United States needs to pick up some small, crappy little country and throw it against the wall just to show the world that they mean business. She says, what can one say to that? Abso-fucking-lutely. Yes. Oh, there are more people coming in. Hi, welcome everyone. Please grab yourself some tea, and we are reading The Architecture of Modern Empire, an interviews with Arundhati Roy. And if you can, please hit my goal up, because I do these readings for free. Well, we've still got like 10 minutes to go. But thank you for being here. How are voices like this given such prominence in the media, while voices like Noam Chomsky or Howard Zinn or Edward Said or Angela Davis and others completely marginalized? I can imagine her face when she hears this. But that's the project, isn't it? The project for the new American century. Why are we asking these questions or feeling surprised? We know. And the brazenness of it is perhaps not such a bad thing. I'm for brazenness because at least it clarifies what's going on. And you know, you have to believe that eventually all empires flounder, and this one will. What about women's role in the globalization project? What factor does gender play? Seriously? That's not an easy question to answer. What if you reverse it and say, what factor does gender play vis-a-vis men? Women are as complex, and different women benefit differently and suffer differently. So when it comes down to, say, the privatization of water, obviously in the Indian context, it affects women much more than men, because they are the ones who have to walk not 1 kilometer but 15 to fetch water. And that could be millions of women's whole lives just going to scratch water out of some little place. Just to get one pot, you might have to walk miles. But it's not a question that I can answer easily, because there are so many aspects to what we mean by globalization. The first half or more of my life was spent fighting the cruelties of tradition, dreaming of escaping this little village that I grew up in, hoping that I wouldn't have to marry one of those men and produce children for him. And then I came up against the vulgarity of what modernity offers, and I had to refuse that too. I went through the same journey. B, you can message me in the Discord about that. I had to walk a high wire, if you like, between the two. One is constantly making political choices, and I'm one of the lucky ones. Others don't have that choice, or don't see it that way, because sometimes what you're running from is so cruel that you can only just run. This is particularly complex, so let's just say that the project of corporate globalization increases the distance between those who make decisions and those who have to suffer them. Let's say neoliberal capitalism is a flawed machine. Inevitably, it leads to a huge disparity between rich and poor, and within the poor, it pushes women to the bottom. Okay, I'm going to stop there actually, because now we're getting into the World Social Forum. So, any comments or questions? The puzzle piece thing came just in time. Okay, well, I'm going to be chilling out in the Discord. I'm going to make myself another cup of tea. Please, if you can, hit this goal because, all of those things. My links are in my bio. And yeah, we have a week of readings ahead. So yeah, join me tomorrow. Thank you so much. Thank you, JJ. I feel like I needed to do this today. My heart was just feeling so heavy, and things are tough. Alrighty. I shall chat to you all in the Discord. If you want to join me there, I'm going to be doing some diamond painting and then some writing. To Twitch and YouTube. Catch you all tomorrow, and we will be reading this thingy. Yeah. Yes, we are still on Orientalism. But yeah, I shall see you all tomorrow. And stick around TikTok.